Lesson 8.2, welcome back, grade 8. This is all about the Aztec social hierarchy. They had a hierarchy. We've seen hierarchies before. We've talked about them in previous units, but we're going to see what this particular hierarchy says about Aztec society. So stick around and let's learn something. How did the structure of the Aztec society tell us what is important to the Aztec people? This is lesson 8.2. We are going to be taking a look at a hierarchy again. The Aztec hierarchy, this time the Aztec social hierarchy to be exact. A couple of things that you need to know. There were two main classes. I'll show you this in the next slide, but there's two main classes. You have the nobility class and you got the commoners. And you are born into your class. However, as we go through this chapter, you will see that there is going to be some movement that is allowed in these classes. We've got the emperor at the top, followed by nobility and priests, the merchants, artisans, and soldiers, farmers, fishers, and women. And at the very bottom, we have the slaves. So the emperor is at the top. You can see here, this is the image right from your textbook. So again, it's the emperor at the top, nobility and priests, merchants, artisans and soldiers, fishers, farmers and women, and then slaves at the bottom. We will have a thing dedicated to Aztec slaves in a little bit, because the Aztec slaves weren't the slaves as you know them from grade 7 social studies. Aztec slaves are going to be a little bit different, and I'll go into details in all of these in a little bit. First, though, we're starting with the emperor. The emperor is, we saw this in the opening story from lesson 8.1. The emperor is the great speaker, and he is a human. Obviously, he's human. And he is chosen actually from the nobility class. He is chosen to be emperor. And he's part of the noble class. But then once he becomes emperor, he is treated as if he were a god. And he is in a spot all on his own on the hierarchy. He is the chief priest. He is the commander-in-chief. And he is the head of state. Chief priest, that's pretty straightforward. He is in charge of the Aztec religion. He is the commander of the army, so he leads the Aztec military. And he is chosen as emperor because of his great skills on the battlefield. That has a lot to do with him becoming chosen as emperor. He is a skilled warrior who needs to know strategy, and you need to be able to lead others. If you're not a skilled warrior, who's going to follow you? If you don't know strategy, you're going to be sending out your warriors, your army, into harm's way. So you need to know those things. You need to be good at those things. And of course, he is the head of state politically. He has the final decision, the final say in everything that is happening. But like all good leaders, obviously, he is going to have a council that will advise him. And his council comes from the priest and nobility class. But ultimately, the emperor, and in everything that we're talking about in terms of Aztec society, the emperor's name that we have, our emperor in this story, is always going to be Moctezuma, and he always had the ultimate say. So that's the emperor. The emperor is at the top. Then we have nobility and priests. And there's a very small number of nobility and priests that exist, because otherwise the hierarchy is not going to work. If you've got too many people towards the top of the hierarchy, it's going to collapse. Oh, where did we see that before? Oh yeah, that's right. Unit 1, that's how we saw feudalism collapse, because too many people were moving up. So in Aztec society, you only have about 10 to 15% of the Aztecs in the nobility class. They held political power, they had money, they were wealthy. The priests were a part of this rank, and the jobs given to the nobility oftentimes revolved around government and education. They went to different schools from the commoners, they learned different things, they had different responsibilities. That is your nobility class. They are separate from the other class. The other classes are our common class, and they are separated usually into family clans. And these family clans, they're organized into neighborhoods essentially called kalpoli. And members lived in these kalpolis, and they worshipped at the same temple. They did everything in those kalpolis. Sometimes these kalpolis were based on jobs. So you had all your goldsmiths in one area. You had all your feather workers in another area. They lived and worked and they worshipped all in the same place. And that really helps should you need anything done quickly or should you need help with anything. You can rely on those neighbors of yours to help you in whatever it is that you need. Other kalpolis, on the other hand, other neighborhoods, on the other hand, they were based on close family ties. So that's usually how that's usually how it was determined where you lived in Tenochtitlan, based on family or based on the job that you do. Now, each neighborhood, each kalpoli, was owned by the group, and that is where members would live and farm. So it was like a communal kind of ownership. Each kalpoli had an elected captain and an elected council as well. The council would then assign which land is going to be used, assign where you're going to live, and they would be in charge of collecting taxes. Now here, this is going to be really important. Paying taxes in Aztec society was very important, and we'll see how each group was responsible for paying those taxes. Really, really important. The kalpoli, these councils also made sure that the kalpolis were clean, and they were elected. So this did give some political power to us commoners that were there. So what were some of the commoners that existed? Well, the merchants, for one, were part of the common class. They were the richest of all of the common class neighborhoods. They went on these vast trading expeditions. They were in and out, constantly moving goods around. They became wealthy that way. They were very talented because as they were on these trading expeditions, they were gaining knowledge of the territory, gaining knowledge of geography, gaining knowledge and studying the different strengths and weaknesses of the people that they come in contact with. Essentially, not only were they merchants and trading things, but they were also spies, which was really important to the Aztec society for when they needed to go and conquer groups for tribute or for sacrificing victims. They would rely on the knowledge provided by the merchants, the intel provided by them, to go out on these campaigns. And, oh, look at this. We see this again. They paid their taxes. There's going to be a common theme here, people. Taxes is going to be the theme. Artisans are next. These are your mask makers, your goldsmiths, your feather workers. If you were one of those three, you were the most respected of the artisans because your work went and decorated that of the soldiers, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, the importance of having these soldiers display these rare masks and these feathers, and that really is going to intimidate their opponents. They raised tropical birds if they were able to in Tenochtitlan. They would raise them there to be used in fans and headdresses and tunics, on shields of the soldiers. Hopefully, maybe there's enough foreshadowing going on here that some of you will know what's coming in later lessons of this chapter. So they were doing this, the fans, the headdresses, the tunics, the shields for the soldiers, but they were also making things for the nobility class because only the nobility class were allowed to wear feathers. So you're either a soldier or you're part of the nobility class. And if you're a certain type of soldier, then once you're done serving in the military, you are going to go into the nobility class anyways. Oftentimes, though, these feathers weren't being able to be grown in Tenochtitlan, so they had to obtain them from tribute. You should remember tribute from the previous chapter. Tribute is what was given to the Aztecs from the people who were being conquered. The next group of commoners are the farmers. This goes without saying, they grew crops. Hunters and fishers, they fall within the group of farmers, obviously. Oh, look at this. They're paying their taxes again based on the produce that they produce. Again, taxes are going to be really important. These groups were really vital to the Aztecs because they fed the Aztec people. Going out on these campaigns to get sacrificial victims is not going to be an easy thing to do. So you have to feed your soldiers, and you have to feed them well. A little side tangent, speaking of being well fed, go check out Michael Phelps. Google Michael Phelps and see how much this Olympic athlete has to eat on a regular basis to maintain his form and his performance. Same with the Aztecs. The Aztecs were warlike individuals. They were constantly at war. They need to be fed well, along with all of the other Aztecs that are around. That's going to be provided by the farmers. Now, not only were the farmers responsible for feeding the Aztec people, they also did the hard work by donating hours to state projects. We have farmers do this, and we saw this with the peasants in Unit 1 when we were talking about the beginning of the Renaissance and our way through. These guys are super strong, so why wouldn't you have them do all of the hard work? And they did it, and they were proud to do it because that was a very important thing for them. I want to switch gears a little bit. We're going to talk about signs of status. We have status today in Canada. We have an upper, middle, and lower class, and you can easily tell where a person fits in society today. Well, same thing was true during Aztec society times. You could tell a person in society by the way they looked. You could tell by their clothing, by their jewelry, and by the size and location of their homes. For example, only nobles could wear cotton, so their clothing is going to be much better than the common class of people during the Aztec society. And it was only the nobility class that could live in second-story homes. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? So how do you become nobility? Well, you're either born into the noble class, you either marry into nobility, or you prove your worth on the battlefield. Okay? The more enemies you capture on the battlefield, the better your stats are going to be, right? So you can see on the image here, we have a young soldier on the top left. Is bringing in a prisoner of war, which is going to be end up being sacrificed, this prisoner. And then you can see the next image, the outfit has changed. The shield has changed, okay? Because they are keeping stats on their soldiers. And then on the top right, we have even more work done to the shield and more work done to the outfit. And as we move on to the bottom row, we can see it's increasing. And this is all done by the artisans to reward the soldiers, which shows them leveling up, like the Halo picture from the video game that I have in the bottom right. The more people you capture, the more you will level up in society. So once you're all done in the military, you get to go and join regular society as a noble class based on your work on the battlefield. All right, head over to your notebook and complete the questions for this part of the chapter.